Today we are on the 7th video in the MBTI series, and this time we are talking about ISTP, also called the Virtuoso. And as always, before I get into it, I want to say this clearly. A personality type does not tell you whether someone is a good person or a bad one. How someone actually behaves depends on so many things, including how stressed they are, what kind of environment they grew up in, their mental health at any given time, their hormones, and honestly, who they happen to be dealing with. A person in a dark season of their life is not going to show up the same way as that same person when things are stable. So use this as a guide for understanding, not as a way to put a label on someone and assume you know everything about them. Now let me tell you about ISTP. The letters break down like this. The I is for introversion. The S is for sensing. The T is for thinking. And the P is for perceiving. So this is an introverted, sensing, thinking, perceiving type. And if you're following the series, you can already see that this type and INFJ share almost nothing on paper. One letter out of 4, the I for introversion. Everything else is different. And that difference shows up in some very real ways when these two types interact. So, what does the virtuoso name actually mean? It comes from how naturally skilled this type tends to be with physical tools, systems, and practical problem solving. A virtuoso, in the traditional sense, is someone who has mastered a craft. And ISTPs tend to be exactly that, people who are exceptionally good at working with their hands, understanding how mechanical or technical things function, and figuring out solutions in real time, without a lot of planning. They are not the type to sit around theorizing. They learn by doing, and they often become remarkably good at whatever they give their attention to. Think of the mechanic who can listen to an engine and already know what is wrong before they open the hood. Or the engineer who figures out a structural problem on the fly without consulting a manual. Or the musician who can pick up an instrument and understand how it works faster than most people who have studied it for years. That kind of intuitive, hands-on mastery is very much in the ISTP wheelhouse. Let me talk about their main traits now, because this is where you really start to see the full picture. The first and probably most obvious trait is their independence. ISTPs are deeply self-reliant. They do not need a lot of guidance, oversight, or external input to function. They figure things out on their own, they handle their own problems, and they genuinely prefer it that way. Being told what to do, especially by someone who they feel does not fully understand the situation, is something they find almost physically irritating. The second trait is their love of hands-on experience. Unlike intuitive types who often prefer to work with ideas and concepts, ISTPs are grounded in the physical, the concrete, the tangible. They want to touch the thing, take it apart, see how it works. Abstract theory holds very little appeal unless it connects directly to something they can apply in the real world. They learn by engaging, not by reading or listening to someone explain something from a distance. The third trait is their calm under pressure. This is one of the things that makes ISTPs genuinely impressive to be around in a crisis. Most people panic when something goes wrong unexpectedly. ISTPs get very quiet, very focused, and very effective. Their brain shifts into problem-solving mode almost immediately, and they are not slowed down by fear or the emotional weight of the situation the way some other types are. They are the person you want around when something breaks and someone needs to fix it fast. The fourth trait is their need for freedom. ISTPs do not thrive in rigid, controlled environments with a lot of rules and procedures that they cannot question. They need room to move, to experiment, to try things their own way. Micromanagement is something they genuinely struggle with, and a job or relationship that involves too much monitoring or control will make them uncomfortable and eventually push them away. What are their real strengths? Their ability to stay calm and effective under pressure is probably the biggest one. While other people are still processing the shock of something going wrong, the ISTP has already assessed the situation and is working on a solution. This practical, clear-headed response in high-stress moments is a genuine gift that not everyone possesses. Their problem-solving ability is another strength. They are creative in a very practical way. Not creative in the sense of making art or dreaming up stories, but creative in the sense of finding unconventional solutions to real problems. They see things other people miss because they approach situations without a lot of assumptions about how things have to be done. Their honesty is also worth naming. ISTPs say what they think. They do not dress it up, they do not soften it excessively, and they do not tell you what they think you want to hear. If you ask for their opinion, you'll get their actual opinion. Some people find this refreshing. Others find it blunt to the point of being uncomfortable. But at least you always know where you stand. And their adaptability in practical situations is real. They are good at adjusting to changing circumstances quickly, as long as those changes involve something concrete they can act on. They are not great at emotional uncertainty, but when the situation calls for fast, practical adjustment, they handle it better than most. Now the weaknesses, and I want to be honest about these. One of the biggest challenges for ISTPs is long-term planning and follow-through. They are excellent at responding to what is in front of them right now, but thinking 5 years ahead and staying consistently committed to a long-term plan is not their natural mode. The P in their type means they prefer to stay flexible and respond to things as they come rather than locking into a defined path. This can cause real problems when life requires sustained commitment to something that does not produce immediate feedback. Their emotional communication is also a genuine weakness, not their emotional experience, because ISTPs do feel things. But expressing those feelings in a way that other people can understand and connect with is something most of them find very difficult. They tend to process internally and privately, and by the time they have figured out what they feel, they often do not see the point of going back and discussing it. This can leave people close to them feeling emotionally shut out, even when the ISTP cares about them deeply. They can also be quite private to a degree that creates distance in relationships. They do not open up easily, and they do not often initiate deep personal conversations. The people in their lives have to be comfortable with a certain level of distance and comfortable with the fact that closeness with an ISTP looks different from closeness with more emotionally expressive types. Their resistance to rules and structure can also work against them in environments that require it. Not every system or procedure is unnecessary, and a reflexive resistance to oversight can sometimes look like an inability to function within a team or institution that has legitimate reasons for its processes. And they can struggle with boredom in a way that leads to impulsive decisions. When routine sets in and nothing interesting is happening, ISTPs can get restless in a way that makes them seek novelty, sometimes in ways that disrupt things that were actually working fine. How do they handle relationships? This is probably the area where ISTPs get the most misread, so I want to spend some real time here. In a relationship, they are not naturally expressive or verbally affectionate. They do not tend to say things like, "I love you" frequently, or in a way that feels emotionally loaded. But they show care through actions. They fix things. They help with practical problems. They show up when something needs to be done. For people who feel loved through acts of service and reliable presence, an ISTP partner can feel incredibly solid and real. The difficulty comes when a partner or close friend needs verbal reassurance, emotional vulnerability, or consistent check-ins about how the relationship is going. That kind of emotional maintenance does not come naturally to this type. They do not feel the need to talk about the relationship constantly, and if their partner does, it can feel overwhelming to them. They're also independent in a way that can feel like emotional unavailability. They need space. They need time to do their own thing, work on their own projects, exist without the expectation of constant connection. A partner who is secure and has their own life will work much better with an ISTP than someone who needs a lot of reassurance or togetherness. In friendships, they tend to prefer a small circle of people who they can just be with comfortably without a lot of social performance. They are not going to be the person who organizes group activities or keeps the social thread alive through constant messaging. But they are dependable when it counts, and their friendship, once established, is genuine even if it is quiet. The personality types that tend to get along well with ISTPs are generally those who are low pressure, independent, and appreciative of honesty without needing a lot of emotional maintenance in the relationship. Types that share a similar practical, no-drama approach to life tend to be more compatible. ESTPs often match well because they share the same practical, present-focused, action-oriented energy. ISFPs can also work well because they bring warmth without being overly demanding of emotional expression. Types that are highly emotionally expressive or who need a lot of verbal affirmation and constant connection often find ISTPs frustrating simply because the way this type shows care does not translate easily into the emotional language those types need. How do they deal with conflict? Honestly, conflict is not their favorite territory. Not because they are afraid of it exactly, but because they find emotional confrontation inefficient. They prefer to address practical problems, not emotional ones, and conflict that is primarily about feelings is something they genuinely struggle to navigate. Their instinct is often to withdraw until things cool down, or to offer a practical solution to something that the other person needed emotional acknowledgement for first. This disconnect can make conflict with an ISTP very frustrating for the other person. The ISTP thinks they're being helpful by focusing on the solution. The other person needed to feel heard before any solution was relevant. And the ISTP may not fully understand that distinction. When conflict is practical and logical, they are actually quite good at addressing it directly and without drama. It is the emotionally loaded version that sends them to a quiet corner to wait it out. What careers suit them? ISTPs do well in roles that involve technical skill, practical problem-solving, and a reasonable amount of independence. Mechanics, engineers, surgeons, paramedics, pilots, athletes, programmers, forensic specialists, and skilled tradespeople are all roles where this type tends to thrive. They need work that produces tangible results, that allows them to use their hands or their technical mind, and that does not involve excessive bureaucracy or emotional labor. They struggle in roles that require constant social interaction, a lot of paperwork and procedure for its own sake, or long stretches of work that do not produce any visible outcome. They need to see the result of what they're doing. Now, from my perspective as an INFJ, and I want to be clear that this is just a small additional note, not the main focus. There are things about this type that I genuinely find impressive. Their calm in a crisis is something I notice and respect. When something falls apart and everyone else is scrambling emotionally, the ISTP is already 3 steps into fixing it. That practical steadiness is something I can appreciate even though I operate very differently. Their honesty is also something I respect. They do not pretend to feel things they do not feel, and they do not say what you want to hear just to manage your emotions. As someone who also values honesty, I can see and appreciate that even when the delivery is more blunt than I would choose. Where I find this type harder to connect with is in the emotional and conceptual space. As an INFJ, I naturally move toward depth in conversation, toward the meaning underneath what is being said, toward the emotional texture of a situation. The ISTP is not naturally in that space. They are focused on what is real and what can be done about it. Trying to have a conversation that explores abstract ideas or unpacks feelings with a more rigid ISTP type can feel like trying to swim somewhere the other person has no interest in entering. The emotional distance can also be something I notice. As a type that reads people closely, the guardedness of an ISTP can sometimes feel like a wall, even when I know logically that it is not personal. It just takes time and patience to get past it. But again, the type is not the whole person. Some of the most interesting people I have encountered in conversations are ones where the differences actually created something useful, where the practical mind of one person and the deeper pattern mind of another ended up seeing something more completely together than either would have alone. How can ISTPs grow? Learning to acknowledge the emotional side of situations, even when it feels unnecessary to them, is probably the most important area. Not every problem can be solved with a practical fix. Sometimes people need to feel understood before any solution is useful. Building that awareness and acting on it, even when it feels awkward, makes their relationships significantly healthier. Developing more patience with long-term commitments is also useful. Not every worthwhile thing produces an immediate result. Learning to stay the course through the slower, less stimulating phases of a project or a relationship is a skill that pays off significantly over time. And getting more comfortable with expressing what they feel, at least occasionally, matters more than most ISTPs realize. The people who care about them often have no idea how the ISTP actually feels about them, and that uncertainty creates distance that could be closed with just a little more openness. ISTPs are not going to be the most emotionally demonstrative people in your life. They are not going to remember anniversaries the way some types do, or show up with grand gestures. But when something is broken, they will fix it. When there is a crisis, they will handle it. And when they choose to be in your corner, they mean it. That kind of quiet, Solid, practical loyalty is actually worth a lot, even if it does not always announce itself loudly. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I am currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers, so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my unfiltered diary of solo living in the Philippines, and your support helps me keep this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the Buy a Treat for My Pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I will see you in the next one.